Hello, my name is Sheila Ivory. This is my interpersonal communication project for HSER 508 for Liberty University. I will tell a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate student. I'm currently enrolled in the MET Human Services Marriage and Family program. I attended Liberty last year for my first year of graduate school, and I was enrolled in the LPC program, but it wasn't for me, so I got out of that program and into the Human Service program. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia with my family. My undergrad was in biblical education, minored in Christian counseling. And now I'm currently in online at Liberty. Next slide. Introduction. Interpersonal communication is defined as the type or kind of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. Next slide. When does interpersonal communication happen? Interpersonal communication can happen often whenever people are conversing. It can take place in families, between friends, during an argument, in business situations, and in the classroom. Next slide. Broadening my communication. While conversing, I will talk and listen in ways that emphasize my uniqueness in my speaking ability, responsiveness, reflectiveness, and in my addressability. Then my communication will be more interpersonal. Next slide. The impact of overreaching goals. Willingness to self-disclose more of myself without fear and intrepidation. Stop fearing intimacy and commitment. Be ready to listen without judgment. Be slow to listen at all times. Next slide. The impact of overreaching goals. Continue. Nonverbal communications, gestures many different types. Touching may be self-force, facial expression, and eye behaviors. These behaviors can be used by both the talker and the listener while conversing. Next slide. My master goals. Listening to people without thinking of an answer to give them before they finish talking. Be willing to self-disclose more freely without being concerned about what people will think. Become a better listener without needing to get my point across when a person just needs someone to listen to them. Next slide. Uniquely me, type, and blend. This is expected of me, SI. This is me, SC. People-oriented and task-oriented. Basic motivation, challenge, and control. People expect me to be inspiring and submissive. Others see me as the perfect person. Next slide. Uniquely me, type, and blend. Continue. Leadership, purely rational and emotional. Follower, want to impress and please people. Responds best to people who are people-oriented, love crowds, and individuals. Conflict, preferably healthy environment. Strength, people skills. Next slide. Background behavior blend, positive. I tend to be able to influence and speak in front of large crowds. I can also be a servant in small groups. I am very protective, especially when it comes to my family. My people skills are my strength. I tend to be very loyal and a good encourager. Next slide. Background behavior blend continued, negative. Tend to come to care more about what people think and serving others. People seem to be more important to me than anything else. I spend too much time relating to others instead of working on serious tasks. I tend to talk and listen to people's fears too much, trying to help them. Next slide. Barriers. A listening barrier may appear when the listener does not want to hear what the talker is saying to them. Self-disclosure can be a barrier when the listener does not want to disclose their personal identity to talker. Fear can also be a barrier when the listener fears retaliation or rejection by the talker. Next slide. Barriers continue. Fear can be considered a core barrier when it comes to communication in many people's lives. Jesse Sultan, 2010, writes, a core barrier of a culture of fear and distrust naturally pull other identifiable barriers into its constellation. Fear and distrust produce an absence of dialogue as well as several other related barriers. Next slide. Barrier rituals listening continue. Ritual listening is also a barrier when it comes to listening. Whether we're a talker or a listener, ritual listening looks like friendly listening, but it's not. While we're quiet and watching the speaker, what we're really doing is waiting for the other person to shut up so we can tell our story or make our point. Next slide. Noise pollution. Identifying internal pollution can be hearing only what you want, biased listening, physical fatigue. Gurley Allen, 2009. Identifying external pollution. Television, music, and very loud conversing. These three things can impair the listener's understanding. Next slide. Noise pollution continues. Noise pollution can have negative external hindrances when communicating. Outside forces can have negative effects on health. Goins, Lisa, and Hagler Lewis, 2007 report. The potential health effects of noise pollution are numerous, persuasive, persistent, and medically and socially significant. Noise produces direct and cumulative adverse effects that impair health and that degrades residential, social, working, and learning environments with corresponding real economic, intangible well-being losses. Next slide. Conclusion. Communication is a very real part of our everyday life. It's how we identify who we are and what we want from the listener. To have a healthy, close relationship, we must first disclose our past and present, trusting the listener enough to disclose what went on and what is happening in our lives now to build intimacy. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. Thank you.